Hi, today we're talking to Joy from Edinburgh. How are you today, Joy?
I'm very well, thank you, Sheelagh.
That's good. Would you like to share your story with us?
Yes, sure. Okay, I think I will start from the beginning, which is around July 2019, because I think that's where it all started. And the reason why I chose this particular time is because remember at this time I went to the salon to get my hair done. Then after I left the salon, I got in the car, and for the first time ever, I got confused and didn't know how to drive my car, which I found very strange because I've been driving since I was 17, and at the time I was like 41. And so I asked a passerby back at home. I'm from Tanzania, and I asked a passerby to help me, thinking that maybe there was something wrong with the bonnet or something that's more like, something that a man could handle. Then he got into the car, then started, and then he looked at me like, this is someone who just started to drive. And I was like, oh my God, what's happening here? There must be something wrong. And so I drove my car very slowly back at home, thinking there must be something wrong. I don't know why, but then I just put it back to my memory and then kept on going. And then suddenly we come to February 2020, where obviously the pandemic hit everywhere in the world. And because I have asthma, I decided to stay at home and was self-isolating as a result. And so while I was at home around May 2020, that's when I started getting dizzy spells. The first spell happened around 2 o'clock in the morning. When I woke up, I didn't know what was going on because it was such a bad spell. And I kept saying to myself, oh my God, I'm trying to stay alive so I don't get COVID. Please don't let me get COVID now, because I've been trying very hard to self-isolate. And so for the next couple of days, whenever I was working, I would get dizzy spells until I had to tell the people I was working with that I needed some time alone. And during this time, I was in Tanzania, and I was working and I own a law firm there. And so when we were in the middle of a transaction with people in the UK, and so I had to tell them, please guys, can you just give me some time? I'm not feeling well. And so the dizzy spells continued. And even though I wanted to avoid going to the hospital, I thought, you know what, I have to go, even though many people were avoiding the hospital because of COVID, because they're afraid to get it. But then I thought, you know what, I have to go and get this sorted out. And when I went to the hospital, they looked at me and they ran some tests. And then they said that you have vertigo and gave me some anti-vertigo medication. And so I was on this vertigo medication, and I was actually driving along, having more dizzy spells as I was taking this medicine, until one point I had to start taking taxis because I couldn't trust myself to be on the road. And then in August 2020, the COVID restrictions were finally lifted in Tanzania and in other parts of the world. And so when this happened, my partner, Ross, who is from Edinburgh, decided finally to come and see me. We had been away from each other since January, just before the COVID, and he was very concerned about me. I told him about the dizzy spells, but he just didn't know what was going on. So when he came in August 2020, that's when I started getting loss of vision, like temporary loss of vision. I got it once when I was watching TV on my own, and when he was out with one of his friends having a beer. And then the next time, the loss of vision happened again, and this was when he was in the house. But then it happened very quickly, and I thought maybe it was to do with the contact lenses I was wearing, and maybe I thought that I needed to get my eyes checked, and so I dismissed it and thought, okay, maybe it's nothing wrong. And so the last time I had the dizzy spell was when I was in the pool with my nephew, who was 8. So I was in the pool when it happened, but then I didn't want to scare my nephew, so I sat at the edge and then continued watching him practicing his swimming. And then that same night at 4 o'clock in the morning, I woke up to go to the bathroom. When I got to the bathroom, I couldn't recognize my face in the mirror. It was almost like my brain had decided that it didn't want me to see what was going on with my face. But then I tried to speak out and I couldn't hear I couldn't make a sound. And I thought to myself, maybe I'm just having a bad dream. And so at the time I just went back to sleep. And then when I woke up, and then at 8 o'clock, Ross tried to wake me up. And the reason why he woke me up early was because we were going to go to one of the islands to celebrate after my firm had turned 5 years old. And so he woke me up, and I didn't want to get out of bed. And then he said, "Joy, you have to wake up." Then when I just mumbled something, and he couldn't hear what it was, and he thought there's something wrong with her. And because my lips had started to droop on one side, and he thought that maybe I had been bitten by a bee or something. And then, but at the back of his mind, he thought that maybe I'd had a stroke. But then he thought, Joy is too young to have a stroke. But then he just decided that he was going to take me to the doctors immediately. And luckily, there's a clinic nearby which many of the experts use. So I went to the clinic, but unfortunately, because it was on a Saturday, it was not like on Saturday they don't work like full time. There is like a stand-in doctor who's on call. So even the nurses there did not know whether I was having a stroke. So they just said to me, they checked all my vitals, which was fine, but then they said, you have to wait for the doctor to come. And the doctor was just taking forever until the nurses said, you have to go to a proper hospital. So that's when Ross got me in the car, and my sister met me at the clinic, and then we drove to the main hospital. And I remember when we were on our way there, I kept looking at the ocean, and I was just thinking, this is it. This is the time for me to go. And because my mother had passed away 7-8 years prior, I said to myself, Mom, I'm ready to come and join you. And then when we got to the hospital, they took me into the emergency room, and they did all those tests that you do, like with checking your face and your limbs. And immediately the woman said, she's had a stroke. And my sister and Ross just couldn't believe that it happened. And immediately they said, we have to get her to have an MRI scan. So I went to have the MRI scan. It was confirmed that I had an ischemic stroke on the left side of my brain. And so I stayed in the hospital for like 6 days, where they continued to do tests, and they found out that there was nothing wrong with me, because they did all the tests, including COVID and high blood pressure and everything like that, and they couldn't find anything, because at the time of the stroke, I was very healthy. My blood pressure at that time was under, I don't know how it works, but it was under 100. The high number was under 100. And at the time of the stroke, I weighed 48 kilos. And I was exercising 5 times a week. So of course, it couldn't be any of these things. And even though we have a history of blood pressure in my family, all my glucose levels were fine. So they couldn't understand what was going on. And they just said, you have a stroke, so now you have to do therapy. And so I started therapy in the hospital initially. And then later on, I had it at home, because I didn't want to come to the hospital to have it there because of COVID. And so we had and unfortunately in Tanzania, the services when it comes to stroke are not very, are still at a rate that is quite low. So even though when I was doing physio, I slowly got very used to it, because of the fact that I was very active. So in the end, I started to teach him how to help me do boxing. So I was teaching him all these things when he should have been the one to have been teaching me. And at one point I said to him, I would like to try and drive. And he said, no, you're not ready. And I said to Ross one day, let's try it. And we went into the car, which is a 4x4. And I actually drove all the way to the end of the road and did a 3-point turn and turned back and came back. And so I said to Ross, you see what's wrong with these people? They don't encourage you, so you just have to do it yourself. And occupational therapy is another area that basically doesn't exist. So basically, every day Ross had to help me, had to bathe me and dress me and even do my hair. And you know, with African hair, it's very difficult to do it, especially when you don't know what to do.
Yeah.
And even with my brother, there was nobody to teach me. So in the end, so he had to do it until I had the power in my right hand and I was able to like move it myself. And even when I had my period, I didn't know how to peel off the pads. So Rose had to do it for me. And that was like, for me, quite embarrassing because these are things that women are supposed to keep to themselves, but I had no choice, and Ross was like, "It's okay, just tell me what to do."
Oh,
and when it came, and you see, the thing is, in my family, I've got a father, a sister, and two younger brothers, but they weren't really there. They used to come they used to come to see me at least 4 hours a day, but then they would leave and leave me and Ross to it. So Ross was the one who became my carer, whereas normally in Africa, when a stroke happens, the carer moves to the family. But then when my sister mentioned this at the hospital, that I was going to stay at my father's, I just knew that something was going to happen to me. So I said to him, I'm not going to my father's, I'm going to stay at home and Ross is going to take care of me. Because I knew that Ross would be encouraging and he would like listen to me and he would help me as much as he could.
Yes.
And obviously that was a bit of a problem because of course I am African and he is European. So I created a bit of friction already. But then also when it came to like things like mental health, after when I had my first outpatient consultation with one of the neurologists, Ross asked the neurologist whether I should have some counseling. And he said, no, that's not the African way. But then the thing is, a few days after we had the consultation, I started having a really bad panic attack. And then suddenly I wasn't able to sleep in the same room when it came to the evening. I just felt this feeling that I was replaying back all the memories. And so we ended up like sleeping in different rooms, including even the living room. But then I still couldn't sleep at like until 6 o'clock in the morning. And so suddenly, and then so Rose told my sister that something is wrong with her and we really need to find a psychiatrist to talk to her. And so he thought that the first thing he thought that maybe I was suffering from PTSD.
Yeah.
So he contacted one of his friends here in Edinburgh who's had PTSD and uses a EMDR, which is random, I think it's eye movement. I forgot what it is, but it's something to do with desensitization of their mind. So that's your
right,
something like that. And so we tried to find a psychiatrist, and we were lucky. We found one in Tanzania, the only one in Tanzania who actually practices this thing. When I went to see her, the first thing she said is like, we have to put you on antidepressants and sedatives. And I was like, you know, I don't really like taking medicine. You know, even an antihistamine to me is like something that you really have to force me to take. And so when she told me that I had to take this medicine, I was like, you know what, give me something that will help me go to sleep, but won't leave me feeling like dizzy in the morning. And the reason why I wanted this is because I wanted to be able to know what's going on and to be aware of what's going on around me. And so she gave me the sedatives, which actually work. For the first time after the stroke, I managed to have like 8 hours of sleep, which was good. And then we started the EMDR sessions, and after 4 sessions, I was cured. And I was able to sleep in my room and go to the bathroom at night without triggering any of the memories. But then we also wanted to do some other things about like stuff to do with my mother passing away and the way my family handled the situation. But then that's when I clashed with the psychiatrist, because most psychiatrists in Tanzania put a big value on family, and so they don't want to go there, or they tend to side more with the family than with the person who needs therapy. And so I said to her, okay, fine, then I'll find somebody else. And when it came to emotional support for my family, although they were there for me financially, I found that I wasn't getting much support from them except for Ross and my nephew and my sister, especially when it came to things like the small wins. Like, for example, being able to hug someone with both hands or even move my finger, which I found very discouraging, because for me, that was like a big win, being able to regain all these things. But then the only people who were like clapping for me were Ross and my nephew. And I found that there was no sympathy for the condition from people around me, especially when there was a change in my behavior. And most of them, because in the past I was quite, how do I say, I was quite passive. Although at work I was aggressive as a lawyer, but when it came to family, I was quite passive because I didn't want to stir things or create conflict. So I was actually quite passive. But unfortunately, or should I say fortunately, the stroke changed my behavior and I became more outspoken, and they did not like that. And they tried to talk to the physiotherapy about that. He tried to explain to them that it was because of my stroke, and they said, we don't care. She has to change. It's all us to change, not us. And I was like, okay then, so what's going on? And when it came to like community support, it was very difficult for people to understand what was a stroke and what it involves. Because when I told people, when people found out that they had a stroke, they thought that it was like COVID or like malaria. So and I remember one time, I think it was during the first month after my stroke, one guy wanted to introduce me to a client. And at this time, I couldn't even remember the alphabet or numbers or even colors or even speak properly. And then he still wanted to introduce me to a client. And I was like, you can't, please, can you just leave me alone? Because I'm still recovering. And he tried to keep pushing me. And I said, please leave me alone. And another guy wanted me to have a look at his business plan. Imagine, this is a month after my stroke. And I was like, don't these guys know what a stroke is? Because everyone just expected me to go back to being myself. And they just thought it was like a minor stroke or something like that. And even with my family, they wanted me back to work as soon as possible. And so they even lied to people that I was either sick, or or was in Scotland. So they didn't want people to know about my condition. I think it's because they felt ashamed of me. And that spilled over to me and made me feel ashamed and powerless. And I felt like I was judged, and I felt lonely and basically uncared for, especially only by Ross and of course my nephew. And even some of my friends, some of the people that I thought were my friends just seemed to disappear. I think it's because we no longer had something in common. But fortunately, something that I didn't expect were those people who I previously had assumed were acquaintances. They were the ones who stepped up and really came and got in touch with me on a daily basis to check on me. But the other people that I thought were friends just disappeared.
It's very common, yes, it's very common.
And I found this very distressing because I was always there for these people. And then when it was my time, they just disappeared. And first I thought, do you think that a stroke is infectious? It's something that will happen to anyone, but they just didn't want to understand. And also there wasn't really help for carers, meaning Ross. So he had to do everything on his own. But then luckily, because he was spending so much time looking after me, he wasn't actually looking after himself. And most of the time would actually eat takeout or not eat at all. And so one of my friends actually made him a care package for a whole week of food. So luckily he was able to have some food to sustain him, so he didn't have to worry about me. So he didn't have to worry about himself and could concentrate at me. And the more the months went on, I thought to myself, I need to do something to make sure that Ross has more time to himself. Then I started teaching myself how to wash properly by myself, and at least to dress myself, which until now, of course, takes forever. But then it was this small thing that would give him a break so that he would have a minute or two to gather his thoughts. And there were also issues of like stigma back at home, because disabilities are seen as taboo in Africa in general, and strokes, and anyone who has a disability, whatever it is expected to stay indoors unless they become normal again. So my family was trying to keep me indoors, but you know me, I was like adamant to be outside, because I knew that in order to recover from anything, you need fresh air and you need to be surrounded by people. So whenever they weren't there, I would tell Ross to drive me around. And luckily we have a beach that's nearby. So we would drive to the beach and sit there and listen to the ocean and feel the breeze on my face. And at one time I was actually walking on the sand. So that was like something that we would do together. And it would actually help me feel more alive. And I remember even when I was out in public, like walking, people would stare at me, and that would make me feel like ashamed. And because in Africa, when you have a stroke, most people think that it's to do with that you've been cursed or you've been hexed. So when they look at you and you walk, and 1 minute you're all fine, and the next minute you've had a stroke, they automatically think that you've been cursed. And that's probably one of the reasons why they choose to stay away, because they think that maybe the curse will be passed on to them, which is very, very sad. Because these things can happen at any time, but people just don't really care or want to know about them. And I wasn't really getting much help from my family, especially because I couldn't read properly or listen to them. So they didn't want to listen to me. And but then of course I had to like dig inside of me and to work really hard to stop myself feeling ashamed of myself, because I knew that if I kept on being ashamed of myself, then it would make my recovery very difficult. And so I also felt that I couldn't speak about all the things that were going on with me and what I was feeling. And so in the end, after 3 weeks of 3 weeks after the stroke, I decided to write a diary. And so I wrote this diary, but then, and I thought it was just going to be a daily diary, but in the end, it turned out to be a book which was published in Tanzania. Wow. It's actually available as well online. In the book, I talk about all the things that had happened, and all the things that carers and family members and family and friends of stroke survivors should learn about stroke survivors. And because of my background, which is I was Muslim at the time, I was not allowed to use my left hand because of religious reasons. And so there I was like with the weakness in my right hand, and I had my left hand, which was actually there. But then my family was saying, no, you can't use your left hand. Then I asked my physio if it's okay for me to use my hand. He said, use whatever hand that works. That gave me more freedom. And so I started using my right hand, my left hand. And so I was able to clean myself properly and do more things. And when I wrote the book, I actually started writing it on my phone with my left hand. And then I went on to the computer and finished writing it with my left hand. But then every time when I was writing, I would turn to Ross, I would ask him, how do you spell this word? And so there was a lot of back and forth, like, how do you spell this word and that word? But then as soon as my fingers hit the keyboard, suddenly the words started coming back and everything was flowing. And even when he was reading it, he said, Joy, I don't know how you managed to do it, but the structure of your book is very much like how you structure things when you do the law. So even though I had lost my long-term memory and couldn't remember about the law, I was still able to structure things properly.
Oh, gosh.
And so, I think instead of trying to get some rest, that was something that I was actually focusing on, which I think in hindsight, I should have spent more time resting. But then I'm the kind of person that even if I've got a cold, I just can't sit still. I have to do something. Otherwise it will just make me go insane. So we wrote the book, and then shortly after, we decided that because where we were, I didn't feel safe in Tanzania in terms of the environment that I was thriving in. And at the time, my partner's family had a medical problem, and so he had to fly back to Edinburgh. And I told him, why don't you go back to Edinburgh and I will stay here? And he said, no, I'm not leaving you here. And so we both flew back from Tanzania to Edinburgh, which was a rather long journey because we had to spend 10 days in Kenya because Kenya was not on the red list. Then after the 10 days, then we had to travel directly to Edinburgh. Then when we were in Edinburgh, because again of COVID, we didn't take the bus or a train, we just hired a car. So that was another 6 hours of driving. But all of that, we actually made it to Edinburgh. And since I've been here, I've actually been able to thrive so much. Because when I came here, a few months after I was here, I signed up with a sports therapist. And because I think I'd already passed all the normal rehabilitation for stroke patients, I wanted to get back to the thing that I liked. And the main thing that I liked and I'd been doing until the stroke was actually kickboxing.
Wow.
I'd been kickboxing since 2004. And so that was my aim, to get back into boxing. And so the therapist said, okay, we'll start slowly. And so every week I've been boxing since then. And recently I've started weight training.
Oh, gosh.
Because they said that if I do weight training, then it will make my punches much stronger. And so last week I was able to lift 34 kilos.
Wow.
And right now, because of what's been going on and all the stress, I actually weigh 42 kilos. So I actually lifted at about 70% of my body weight.
Gosh. Wow.
And so he was telling me how, Joy, you're very strong. You remember when you first came here, you were just so, you were so timid and you were very afraid of anything. And look at you now, you're like driving. Like in November, I went wall climbing for the first time ever. And I managed to also, and I also managed to go, and I also managed to do a bit of running, which I'm doing more. And so every time around, I send him a clip and I say, what am I doing wrong? And then he corrects me, and then I go back and I continue to run again. So I wanted to tell people that even though you've had a stroke, if you're committed and you're persistent, you can get back to what you wanted to do. It takes a lot of courage and determination and perseverance, but if you are strong and if you're determined, then you can get there. Because the other day we went fruit picking with Ross, and we walked for 2 miles to go into the fields to pick some cherries and raspberries, and that included bending down and lifting fruits and then putting them back into the basket and then keep walking again. And this was all in the sun. And I really enjoyed it because it was something that I hadn't done before. I just heard about cherry picking, but I didn't know what it was. And the other time we actually went to a Darren Brown show. And so I'm doing all these things that I probably wouldn't have done when I was at home, because at home they would have just kept me indoors. But here, because I see that so many people I see that the community here are more understanding. So that encourages me to go out there and do things. So I don't just stay at home every day. If I want to go to the shops, I go there by myself. And even when I go to the hairdresser, I even go there on my own.
Yeah.
But the thing I've noticed about the awareness in the community, especially including here, is that many people from the African community and even some people in the European community are not aware of strokes. And I remember once when I was here, someone said to me, I said to someone, I've had a stroke. And she said, don't worry, my sister had that, you'll be fine. And I was like, seriously, do you really think that it's one size fits all when it comes to strokes? Everybody recovers at a different pace depending on where the stroke affected us. And so you can't go around telling people that how come you haven't recovered? Because my neighbor has had the same thing. I don't know whether he's had an ischemic stroke or a transient stroke. Just assume that because it's a stroke, that everyone will recover at the same time. So I've made it my mission to go around educating people about this, so that they're aware that it can happen to anyone and at any time. And also as a result, even though I've written a book, I also started posting a lot of things on my Instagram. I've also had a lot of interviews and podcasts, especially and on newspapers and magazines. And I'm also active in a range of online forums to raise awareness about strokes and also to know more about my symptoms. Because sometimes you might think that you're the only one who has a particular symptom, but it seems that everybody else has the same.
Yes.
And so they will share with you what their thoughts are and how they handle it. For example, when I was at the hospital, they didn't realize that I had weakness in my throat muscles. And so they were going to give me no more food. And luckily, they gave me a fish which had bones. And luckily, something happened. One of the doctors who came by discovered that I hadn't eaten my food. And so when she found out that I had problems with my throat, she was very upset, and she immediately brought a feeding tube. And for 5 days when I was in hospital, I had this tube in my throat, and all my food was basically going down the tube. And it was funny because I would watch my sister and Ross eating pancakes, and there was having this sludge going down my tube. And I was like, you guys are lucky that I have willpower. Otherwise, I would have taken all that. I would have grabbed that that pancake and just waffled it down, even though I couldn't eat. And for 5 weeks after the stroke, I was still on blended food. And even nowadays, when I'm eating food, I have to be careful the way I eat it so that I don't choke or the food doesn't go down the wrong path.
Yes. Yeah.
And recently, I discussed this with someone on the forum, and they told me that you have to make sure that nobody is around you or talks to you while you're eating, so you can focus on your food. He also said that for him, he found that breathing through your nose while eating helped him a lot. So you're concentrating on breathing through your nose rather than breathing through your mouth and eating. So all these things so I found that there's a lot of people here within the different stroke communities that are there to help each other, compared to when I was in Tanzania. Because in Tanzania, when you have a stroke, it's almost like a taboo subject for anybody who has a stroke, doesn't want to discuss it with anybody else. So there I was trying to find somebody to talk to about this, but nobody wanted to talk to me. And so the only way I had somebody who I could talk to was a lady who was Swedish, who lived in Netherlands. And so she talked to me about what happened to her, and that actually made me feel a bit better.
Oh gosh.
So imagine you have no support in Tanzania, and there's no stroke association. And so a lot of people, when they found out about me and heard about me, whenever they have a stroke, they contact me on Instagram. And this is very good, but at the same time, I'm like, please guys, can you do something in Tanzania and create like some kind of stroke organization, because I'm still healing. So I don't have as much as I'd like to help everybody else, but I still need to focus on myself too.
Yes. We find there's quite a few people contact us from around the world saying there's nothing like different strokes or even the stroke association in our country for support.
Yes.
And it sounded like you could have done with the support of other stroke survivors.
Definitely.
With all the restrictions you had one way and another back home.
Sorry?
Because of you could have done with the support of other stroke survivors because of all the restrictions.
No, because the thing is, in Tanzania, even though we had COVID, it was business as usual. People were not wearing masks. Not many people were wearing masks. There was no lockdown.
Oh God.
So you could have easily met around in a group and discussed this, or if you had wanted, you could have done it online. But then another thing is basically about the cultural barriers, because most people think that stroke recovery is only about the physical aspects, and they forget that stroke recovery also involves the mental aspect, and mental health is still a taboo subject in Africa. So people don't talk about that and probably end up with this trauma for a long time, And when they have the stroke, they just don't want to talk about it because they don't want to relive the trauma. That's probably what I'm thinking.
And of course, as well, if stroke survivors are an embarrassment and made to stay in, that all these things, you say how much just going to the beach helped you and everything, you know, and it's, oh gosh, it's.
And you know what, after the beach, I started actually going out for drinks as well, because in Dar es Salaam where I live, there are like many open bars where you can have views of the ocean. So I would pick one, and Ross and I would go there and actually sit there in the sun, and I would have my would have it cold beer and would have my smoothie. And so at the beginning there would be people staring at me, and then I thought, you know what, I don't see you, I'm just here with Ross. And that's how I managed to cope, because I said to myself, whenever people were saying at me, it's like, you're not here. And so I would just, that's the way I would cope with the shame.
Oh God.
For some people, they can't put it aside, and so when people stare at them, it actually demotivates them.
Yeah.
So sometimes they would rather stay at home than go out, which is sad, because last year at home, you know, in Africa, many people have like help. They can be in the form of like people who work in the home, or people who help you, who are like a driver. And so last year, around this time last year, a family driver who had been with us for 20 years, he also had a stroke. When I heard that, I was like very upset. And then I called him and I told him, I'm not leaving you alone. Don't worry, even though I'm thousands of miles away, I will be with you all the way there. And so I sent my physiotherapist from Tanzania to go and work with him. And also I took him to the hospital that I went to. And when he was there, he saw people who were in a worse off situation than him. It gave him some motivation, knowing that he was not as worse off as them, and that it was possible for him to recover. And so the last time that I spoke to him, he actually sent me pictures, and he was at the gym working out.
Oh, bless.
And I was like, you see what would have happened if you had just stayed in bed.
Yeah.
And you know, the thing is also one of the things that stops people from going to see doctors in Tanzania or anywhere in the world is because the first port of call if you have an illness is they go to the local witch doctor. And so, like with my driver, a lot of his friends were saying, you need to go and see a local witch doctor. And I said, no, don't even think about that. I will pay for you to go to the hospital. Don't even think about going to the witch doctor, because if you go there, then you will basically die, because they just don't know what they're doing. They'll just take your money and they'll prescribe some weird medicine for you to take.
Yeah.
But then also I've noticed that doctors not only in Tanzania, but also here in the UK are suspicious of medical doctors and also suspicious of their practices. And especially I've noticed that here in the UK as well, many Africans are also suspicious about the NHS doctors because because of the way they feel treated. And for me, I had this experience one time when I came over to see Ross, because at that time it was like a few years after my mother had passed away, and when she died, she had cancer. And so I wanted to know if I had cancer markers in me. And so I went to a private hospital to see if they could do the test. When they did the test, it involved taking blood for me. And I had two nurses trying to take blood and the doctor too, but then they almost hit the wrong vein trying to take blood. And they said the results were going to be out in 2 weeks. And then when I went back at home, I waited for 4 weeks and I didn't get any results. And so when we called the hospital to try and find out, they said we couldn't give you the results because we didn't have enough blood. And I said, but aren't you the one who's supposed to take the blood sample from me? Is it my fault that you weren't able to get the blood out? And so Ross was like, if you don't refund her money, I'm going to go to the I'm going to report you to the press and you'll be in big trouble. So they had to refund me my money. So from then on, I was more suspicious about the doctors, and I thought that it was strange because I've lived in the UK from when I was young, because I went to school here from 1989. So I knew about the system back then, and it seems that it's just changed so much since then.
Yes. Oh,
And so that's one of the reasons why a lot of people prefer to don't go and see the doctors, because even my driver, he went to one of the local hospitals and they gave him some Chinese medicine, and when we searched for it online, we didn't even find out what it was. It turned out he had high blood pressure and high cholesterol, but they didn't even give him any medication for that. They didn't even give him statins or anticoagulants or anything like that. Then we had to take him to the hospital so he could get the right treatment.
oh gosh.
So there's a lot of things that happen in the world or in African countries that people need to be aware of, apart from the normal things like health.
Definitely.
And so I hope that at least here in the UK, through the Black and Asian community, more people will come out and share their stories, because most people forget that when when they've had a stroke, that they shouldn't be ashamed because they're a survivor. Because it takes a lot to actually survive this condition and to actually go back to being normal. It's something that you shouldn't be ashamed of. It's something that you should be proud of, and you should use an opportunity as a stroke survivor to encourage others.
And be proud of what you've achieved, no matter how small it is. Like you were saying earlier, a small thing for you was, that would seem a small thing for anybody else was a huge thing for you. And, we need to celebrate that, but we need these stories, and we need to know, we need to be educated about it, and we need everyone to speak up and tell us what.
Because I was talking to a guy from Tanzania last week, and he had a stroke. He's 34. He had a stroke due to COVID, and he said that, and he was telling me that you should look after your weight and your health, and I was like, man, you're talking to the wrong person. I've been exercising since I was 24, and I'm like 44 now, so please don't go there.
Yes.
Because he thought that maybe I was like in that category, and I was like, look, man, I look after myself so much. I do tests regularly, and even if I see like something small on my skin, I go and find out what it is. So I actually look after my health as much as I can.
Yes.
So it's like other people that you need to talk to about and share this information about.
Well, that's it. Stroke doesn't decide that it's going to go for the people that are unhealthy or what have you. There's a mixture. There's people that have got high blood pressure and maybe don't know about it or do anything about it, that have a stroke. But then there's people like yourselves, and I know several more that are fit and healthy, but they still have a stroke for whatever reason.
I mean, for example, I was talking to someone on Instagram, and they said that if somebody has a history of a stroke, then it's likely that if someone in your family has had a history of stroke, then it could be genetic. And I didn't realize that, because my mother had a stroke before she died. And so I'm still trying to work out all these things. Then even somebody asked me, like, is anyone in your family had a miscarriage? And I was like, oh God, don't ask me to go there, because miscarriages are also taboo. So do you want me to start going round and round and talking to my female members of the family and ask them if anyone has had a miscarriage? I was like, and of course, with the African community, they don't really share much their personal medical history.
Yeah.
That way, when people have a stroke, especially if they have it because of diabetes, they don't know that diabetes exists in the family. So then when they have it, they wonder why, when it was something that was already there. Actually, with me, whenever I've had the checkups, when people ask me about family history, I say diabetes on mothers and high blood pressure on fathers. That's the only one thing I know. And gout as well. So I mention all these things, and I get as much information as I can. So that will help the doctors determine if any of those things can happen to me.
Yes. Well, do you know what? You've had so many things to battle against, and
I know
you're coming out the other side fighting.
Definitely. You should see me when I'm in the gym. If I've had a bad day, I'm really working the instructor. And he even told me that if you're ever on the streets and somebody tries to attack you, make sure you use your left punch because that's the strongest.
It's funny, isn't it? Because I presume you were right-handed before your stroke.
Yes, yes.
And I was very right-handed before my stroke. I can still use my right-hand side, but it's not as strong as it used to be. My left-hand side is stronger, whereas I couldn't used to be able to do anything with my left-hand side. I always put a screwdriver or whatever in my right hand, but now I'm using my left hand, even though I don't have to.
I always tell my left hand sometimes, okay, you need a break now. You've been doing too much. Okay, now left hand take over and do more things. Because sometimes you get used to using your left hand more, and I'm trying to see if I can get the right hand to do more.
And look what a difference to you being able to use your left hand has been for you, has made for you. You know, if you'd stayed thinking, no, I can't use my left hand, and not fought against that, you know.
And don't forget, even though I was doing all this, I was still actually following up with my practice. So I was like talking to my staff back in Tanzania and like trying to run a practice, but not being actively involved. But still reading every emails every day, and then on the side, like telling the staff what to write or directing them. So it's like trying to recover and then trying to do a bit of work and then trying to do this and trying to do that. And it's like all this stuff keeps me going.
So do you find your law stuff is coming back to you slowly?
Definitely. I mean, definitely. I mean, I can remember stuff from like 2004.
Wow.
Which is when I first started like working for a law firm back in Tanzania. And all my childhood memories are finally coming back. And the way they're coming back is actually very strange, but also very wonderful, because it's coming back through music, which I used as a form of speech therapy, because speech therapy in Tanzania is very expensive. So I went to see a person who teaches people how to sing. And so he was teaching me like how to open my mouth and to increase my the timbre of my voice. And Ross and I used to play like little games, like you would play like the first line of a song from the 90s and say to me, name that song, and I would actually nail it.
Excellent.
And then every time like you would say like a line of a song, but say it in a word, then that would like remind me of a song.
Yes. And
then as I remember that song, that would remind me of the memory that came at the time when I heard the song.
Oh, that's nice to hear. That's nice to hear.
I really like the fact that music has played a big part in my recovery. And I think more people should do that.
Yes, I think people underestimate the power of music in a whole lot of illnesses. Apparently, it's with dementia patients, it's very important because they reckon your music memories are the last to go. So if you want to bring music memories out of dementia patients, you know, singing, dancing, whatever is the way to go.
I dancing as well. I even started dancing, even though my dancing is like worse than it was before. But I remember once I told Ross, I said, I want to learn how to play the guitar, even though my right hand wasn't working properly. And so we have a guitar in the corridor. And I just said to Ross, one day I'll get to it. I promise you. It wasn't like a bad purchase or anything. I'll just get to it one day. Just give me some time.
It's something to aim to, isn't it?
Exactly, because sometimes people will try and the thing I found in Tanzania is that people will not encourage you to do things. They'll just say, this is what you need to do, and it's fine. But let's say I wanted to go and play tennis again. They'll say, you know what, this is what you need to do. You can walk. So why do you want to go and play tennis? Whereas I've always been one of those people that when somebody says, no, you can't do that, I'll be like, watch me. And then I do that and even do it better. It's almost like discouraging me is like, it forces me to like, just to make a point.
Yeah. And you'll find a lot of Scottish people are like that as well. If someone says, no, you can't do it, we're like, yes, we can.
Because, you know, like my family used to, because I was sleeping a lot during the early parts of the stroke, and my family mistook that for laziness. And so I said to them, you think I'm lazy? Okay, watch me. And so I started writing the book. And I was like, who's lazy now?
Yes.
Because I wrote the book and we actually found somebody to help us with the publishing. So Ross and I, between us, we were like working out the publishing and how much we were going to get, how much commission he was going to get. All these things were happening 4 months after the stroke.
Oh my word. That's incredible. Well done.
Thank you. So it's just like things that people think that they can't do. I mean, I know sometimes like on some of these, I remember once a guy on one of the online forums was talking about how he can't do math anymore. And another guy said, I used to be a math professor at university, but I went and did some coaching and now I can do math again. So some people, if they can do math and they can't, they just think, okay, that's it, my life is over.
Yes.
But for me, even though I was not very good at math during GCSEs, later on, I actually took a course where I had to learn math. And then when I had the stroke, my math went away and I couldn't even do basic arithmetics. And then the funny thing is every month I had to pay the salaries and pay the taxes. So I was like, right, you can't get away from this. You have to like learn. And so I had to learn and now it's coming back.
Do you know, it's true if you give it a go and try, because my basic arithmetic went as well, and it's easy to get the phone out and do it on the calculator on the phone. So every now and again I'll challenge myself to just add that together or subtract it and what have you. And the more you push yourself, you find you can actually do it. It's a harder way round, but you can do it if you push yourself. It's about pushing.
I don't know if our phones are still listening to us or not, but because every so often I get a prompt on my phone from Audible, and it's something that Stephen Fry is doing about how to do math, and he's actually reading it.
Oh.
And I'm like, whatever they say about phones is true. They're actually listening to us. So every time I get that on my phone, and I'm like, okay, one day I'll actually download it and listen to it.
That's
and also with my reading is, I mean, I can write and I can read, but the reading out loud is a problem. So nowadays, every time before I go to bed, I read like a chapter and I read it out loud to myself. And then in the past, I used to actually read out loud and record myself and see how well I'm doing.
And does it sound okay to you?
I haven't done it recently. I used to do it in the past, and also I used to actually record my nephew and I reading together his books.
Oh, that's a good idea. Good idea.
And the funny thing is, even though I couldn't speak properly in English, but I could speak better in my native language, is Kiswahili. So when we were in Tanzania, Ross would tell me something in English, and then I would have to translate it to the help in Kiswahili. And then because my nephew goes to a French school, when he got his end of year report, I was able to read it in French, like completely without translating.
Wow. So
I heard that if you know more than one language, then it actually helps your aphasia more. And
that's fantastic that never went, that's 3 languages that you've got there.
So that's why every so often we watch films that are in other languages, just to keep my mind going.
Excellent, fantastic. So you practicing law at the moment, or you just?
I actually asked for what do you call it? I actually suspended my license, but the firm is still going.
Okay.
And it was something that actually a conscious effort that I made, because I didn't want to start giving wrong advice to people. But you see, in Tanzania, they want to get you to work as soon as possible, or in Africa. And they don't realize that sometimes there are parts of your brain that are not fully working, but they still force you to go back to work soon.
Yes, and it's hard to explain to them what is going on in the bit they can't see. So it might be that you're with a client and they're telling you something and you need longer than you would have done
Yes.
to process it before you even start answering or looking into it or what have you. But that's hard to get across to people, isn't
Because
it?
what happened is when the neurologist in Tanzania saw that I was doing well physically, he said, okay, now you can go back to work. And it was 6 months.
Oh gosh.
6 months into the stroke. And I said, thank you very much, but I still think I need a lot more work to do, because myself, I knew that I couldn't go back to work right then.
Yes.
But then people are just so keen to go back to work soon because they don't want to be stuck indoors.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
And
Well,
the-
yes. Yes.
And they were the reason they were saying that, well, you should go back to work is because so that you're not isolated. But I'm like, there's other ways that you can mix with people without feeling isolated. But going back to work is not the right thing.
No.
Because you don't know whether your employer is going to be sympathetic to what you've been through.
Yes. And I'm presuming they're assuming in Tanzania, if you go back to work, you're fine. You're back to normal.
Exactly. Yes.
You know, it's like you've broken your leg, you've had a few weeks resting with your leg out,
Exactly.
your bones mended, and you've gone back and it's fine.
Completely.
You
So
know.
that's why, like, my family was always in a rush for me to get back to work, and I was like, please don't press me.
Well, well done for being being a strong person and fighting against that and
You
doing
know what? I think I
what's
just
right
had to.
for you.
I just had to. There was no choice.
Yes.
Sometimes you just have to. I mean, I know so many people who are struggling back at home, and they don't have the strength that I have. But for me, I was like, this is something that was there, I think, right from when I was young.
Yes. Yeah.
I remember when I was young, once my mother told me, come to the kitchen to learn how to cook. And I said, why do I have to come and learn? Why can't my brother also come too? So I was already a feminist at the age of 9.
You were a rebel then.
Always. I always rub men the wrong way, and they don't like it at all. So that's why when my partner got together with me, I said, be careful, because you know, if you're looking for someone submissive, then you've chosen the wrong person. I will give you the runaround. So I hope you are ready. Because we'll have fun, but I'll also test you, and you'll also challenge you.
And it sounds like he survived so far then.
He is. He's actually enjoying it, because even when I had the stroke, we were sitting there watching the U.S. presidential campaign, and so we were debating whether or not Biden would go in, and my nephew came and was watching us and was wondering what we were watching about. So we had to tell him that it's about this thing happening in America and how this man might have to go home. And he was like, what happens if he has to leave home? And I said to him, don't worry. He's got so many homes that even living in the White House is not a problem.
Exactly. Yeah.
It was like we were there, but they were also teaching my nephew about politics, but in a simple way.
Well, it's been lovely talking to you today, Joy, and
thank
you for sharing your experience and enlightening us. I don't know if that's the right word. It's too late in the day for me. About things back home, and you know, the challenges that you faced back home, but after you've come over to the UK, how you flourished as well. And you could look forward to more fruit picking as well.
And you see, the thing is, you can be second or third or fourth generation British and of African descent, but if there's still that cultural barrier within you, then these issues will still arise.
Definitely.
So it's like trying to get through. It's like a challenge to balance the two. I mean, sticking to your culture, but also being practical.
Yes. And it's something we all need to know about as well, because, you know, it's like you've explained, it stays hidden, doesn't it?
Yes.
So thank you. And
thank you very much.
We'll speak to you soon. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.